Got dreams of being a professional podcaster, but have no idea what you're doing?
This is impossible.
That's about to change.
A new kind of school.
Welcome to the Pod School Podcast.
Hello, welcome to the show. Today's question is from Angelique, and she asks, what is the ideal length of time for a podcast? Great question, and one that just don't have a clear answer. You know, how long is a piece of string, Angelique? That's my answer. The ideal length for a podcast, there is no time. It's not like I can tell you, look, 10 minutes is the best for a podcast, because the ideal length for your podcast will depend on who your audience is and what your content is. In terms of your audience, you need to think about who you are talking to, and that will inform your decisions around the length of your content. What I mean by that is, if you are doing a show for busy mums, you're not going to be doing 5-hour episodes that they're expected to get through. You know, you have to really think like, what time does my ideal audience have available? What are they going to find most useful? And then in terms of your content, you want to do the ideal length that means that the content that you're shipping out is really the best version of that content. So you have fully fleshed out whatever you need to flesh out, but there's no mess, no faff, no fluff, no crap around the edges. You haven't wasted 20 minutes of the intro just chatting and shooting the breeze with your co-host before you actually get new content. You've edited that so it sounds really, really strong from start to finish, and editing is a must in every single podcast episode, so you have to utilize that if you want a professional sounding show. But ideally, you're thinking, well, how long do I need to actually put together the best version of this content? Now that really differs show to show. I have a podcast that I did in the past where I would sit down with media personalities and I would talk to them about how they got into media. I was getting asked a lot of questions of how did you get on TV? How did you get into radio? And I realized, there's a lot of people that are really interested in this, but they think that the answer is going to be, I just applied. It was like, actually, I worked for 15 years before I got on television. So I wanted to sit down with some of the well-known people in Australian media. The show is called You've Got to Start Somewhere. You can check it out if you'd like. And I would sit down and talk about their careers. Now, some of those chats went for over an hour because you can't really go through what you need to go through in 20 minutes. If you are looking at what is the path to get you to where you are now, like how did you do the steps to get there? We needed some time to get through that. This show, however, some of the episodes can be 3 minutes because the question I get asked or the tip I need to share can actually be covered in that time. So I'm not going to fill another 20 minutes with just me faffing about and filling the space and listening to myself talk, because I can actually just give you the content that you've come to listen to and just get out the other side in 3 minutes. And so from my perspective, I'm like, great, you get time back in your day. You've come for what you need. You haven't had to wait through a meandering introduction and whatever to get to it. You've just got the content and you can move on your way. So the ideal length for your shows is really going to be dependent on what your show is and who you're doing that show for. And so you really need to think about those things when you're putting it together. There is no rule book in podcasting, which means you could podcast for 5 hours if you want, but it doesn't mean you should. You really need to think about what suits you, not what the person over there is doing or what you've seen somebody else have success with, because if you try and go down that path and it doesn't work for your audience and it doesn't work for your show, then you are not going to be able to reach that level of success because that works for their audience and their show. The other thing to keep in mind is what's really honestly achievable for you. It is a lot easier to record, edit, and put out 5-minute episodes than it is to record, edit, and put out hour-long episodes. If you think about that and think that editing is absolutely a part of the process that you must do if you want a professional sounding show, if you are recording an hour and a half's worth of content to cut down to 30 minutes or an hour, you got to think it's going to take you an hour and a half just to listen to that content before you've even made any edits. And ideally, you're going through that content multiple times to edit it to get it to the point where you're like, yep, this is great and it's ready to go out. So you have to think about those things when you're planning your show, because you might feel really gung-ho and energetic about it right now, but what will you feel in a year's time when you're like, oh my gosh, I cannot keep up these hour-long episodes? Like, it's actually quite easy sometimes when you are fresh with ideas and you've got your whole notepad full of stuff at the very, very start. But a year and a half on, sometimes you can be pulling your hair out going, oh my God, I wish this show was 20 minutes. I had an experience with another one of my old podcasts where we started out doing really long episodes, probably 45 minutes to an hour. And then as we moved on, we would still record for like an hour or longer, but I just got way more selective with what I was putting into the edits. And so the shows would sort of cut down. And then eventually we sort of sat at 30 minutes, which I actually think 20 to 30 minutes, if you're doing a conversational or an interview style show, that up to a max of about 40 minutes is probably a bit of a sweet spot, depending on what works for your show. But once I started to cut those shows down, I mean, the emails came thick and fast. Where's the rest of the show? Why have you guys cut the show? You know, all your audience care about is like, we used to be able to listen to more and now we can't. So I really think trying to set yourself a really achievable length where you're like, okay, I can get all the content I need in this, so I'm not cutting myself short in any way, but it's also like a manageable time for me to do. Like 30 minutes is much more manageable than trying to do an hour and a half every week. And then if I want to do more and I want to provide more for my audience, do bonus content. Give them an extra episode a week every now and then. Give them something that they weren't expecting. So instead of feeling like they're having something taken away because you're like, I can't achieve this sort of length anymore, rather than then paring back from that, it's much better to sort of set yourself something that's achievable and then provide extra content that your audience weren't expecting. If you are thinking that you want to do really long episodes, think about why. What is your motivation? Is your motivation that you think that's the way you should do it? Is it because Joe Rogan does it? Is it because the shows that you listen to are 45 minutes? Get all of that out of your mind. You have to think about your specific show and what works for you and that show. You can look at what other people are doing and get inspiration from that, but don't use that model as the only model that will work, because the right length for your show is the right length for you. So really try and kind of put the blinkers on in a way and think about what is right in front of you, because sometimes we can get caught up in, but they do an hour-long episode, and should I do an hour-long episode? And a lot of people are like, I don't think I can talk for an hour. If you can't talk for an hour, do not try and fill an hour, because that hour is going to feel longer than an hour. I can tell you right now, it's going to feel like about 70 hours, because trying to fill time, especially if you are solo podcasting, it is actually really hard to fill time on your own sometimes. So if you are trying to fill an hour, you're going to have to prep a lot of content to fill that hour, and that's going to take a lot of time before you even sit down and press record. So think about all those steps in the process before you commit to a length, and you'll be much better placed to kind of carry on with that length, because ideally you want something that you can achieve and hit every single week. Hopefully that has helped you think about the length of your podcast. I'm sorry that I can't say it must be 12 minutes and 52 seconds. That is, according to the algorithm and all of the studies, the perfect triangulated number that you need to hit to get podcast success. It doesn't work like that. It's different for every single show. Thank you so much for your question, Angelique. If you have a question, just head to the description of the episode. There is a link there, as well as links to my free podcasting guide where I go through all the tools and tech you need to get your podcast started, and my online podcasting course, Pod School, where I take you step by step through everything, all the way from coming up with an idea through to monetizing your show. Thanks so much for joining me, and I will see you next week.
That's all for today.